Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, your soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach, psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now. Hi, I'm back with a special guest. And James will introduce himself, and they're going to be diving right into this topic about having to practice humility. And we don't realize how humility needs to show up and help us be aware of, are we walking the path of humility, or are we walking the path of the ego persona, which I talk about in my book quite frequently. And James has a wonderful story to share about his experiences with this whole notion of having to practice humility. So James, why don't you introduce yourself?
I am James W. Smith, a former lawyer, a podcaster, a former minister who pastored for 32 years, retired from the same church. I'm now an interim pastor at my home church in North Carolina. I consider myself just a country boy who grew up in a small town, went off to school, received my degrees from North Carolina Central University and a law degree from North Carolina Central University Law School. Practiced law for about 10 years, in the ministry for about 35 to 40 years. I can't remember exactly. And that is about my background.
One of the things we want to focus on and get right into is looking at this whole notion of having to practice humility.
Well, humility came about with me from an experience. Having practiced law, I always felt that I was on top of the world. I didn't think that I had a lot of humility. I was a little into myself, selfish as you would call it. But I had an experience that caused me to go to the mental hospital in Raleigh, Dorothea Dix Mental Hospital, where I stayed for about three weeks. I got out, and of course, I didn't have a job. And of course, one of my friends gave me a job at his service station. Worked there for close to a month. I had former clients that come by. I had friends, families, everybody that come by. And I'm pumping gas, washing windshields. After having practiced law for 10 years back in my hometown where I was practicing law, I left there and went to service. Well, at that time, we used to call it the Safeway food market. It was very much like a food line. And I worked behind the cashier bagging groceries. At that time, that's what we did. We bagged the groceries and we took it to the cars for the customers. And that's what I did. It was from that kind of experience when I had my former clients that come in. I had my family members, my friends, and here I am bagging groceries behind a cashier and walking it to the cars for former clients that I once represented, for family members, for friends. That was the experience that got me to thinking that how I used to be, thought I was on top of the world. I thought I was here, you couldn't tell me too much. I was a little arrogant. because of who I was. I had been this first and only black attorney in my hometown, the youngest at the time in the state of North Carolina. And so I kind of thought I was on top of the world. So it was from these experiences that I had that began to make me see life in a different way. And that's when I really start to really practicing it, So I really, my whole life kind of changed from those, just having that kind of experience in my life. It changed, and hopefully it made me into a better person.
One of the things you're saying is that you've had certain experience that led up to you having to practice humility. And that's sometimes what happens with the soul too. We have certain experiences that we have, and we've garnered from childhood to adulthood, that has placed upon us an awareness that, oh, we're on the wrong path. We're going down the wrong road. Even though life will tell us, you got the education, you got the cars, you got the money, you got, house, you got, And so that builds up the ego to say, I got it all. And then it moves us off. So where did you start to veer off the path before you moved into realizing you need to practice humility?
Oh, I think I think I had veered off that path probably when I first started practicing law. You have to kind of understand the dynamics. You're back in your hometown. You are the first and only African American practicing law. You kind of get there's a little word you call big headed, So, and I think that's kind of where I got. Before that time, I don't think I was like that, but I was into this frame of mind that I knew everything. You couldn't tell me too much, and I think that's when it all began with me. And I'm not certain that I can put a direct time, but I think it was in this whole process of my practice in law that I got to this point of feeling as if I was kind of, on top of the world. This, I can handle it. Nobody can't tell me too much. It's one of these kind of things that I was kind of dealing with. So, but it was out of the experiences that I went through that brought me to myself and start realizing and seeing things in a different light.
So what were some of those experiences that moved you into saying, because sometimes we know sooner than later that we're not on the right path, that doesn't quite feel right, but we continue down the path because we're used to it or for whatever reason that happens for us?
Well, I hear you, but I'm trying to be as frank and as forthright as I possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a household. My grandfather was a minister. My mom was very committed. So I had the right values, growing up. There was nothing that I consider myself out of kilter with. My mom taught me. The only thing that I didn't have a father in my life because I'm an only child of a single mom. But I had a lot of uncles and grandfathers, so I was around a lot of males. So I had the male image. So I don't think I had this attitude growing up. I think I developed it at a certain point in life, and it's when I think I kind of developed it when I started practicing law. I think my whole concept just changed. I started gambling. I started doing a lot of other stuff that I should not have been doing with other lawyers and bondsmen and all this kind of stuff. I think that's kind of when I got on this wrong path.
I think you're right. We can sometimes have a good foundation, but we get veered off. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, my father used to say when all of us were getting educated and graduating from college or going to medical school or going to, psychology, which is my focus. My father used to say, "Be careful of education."
Mm-hmm.
Because the education will allow you to believe that you're more than what you are. You always have to be grounded in your true self. And that trueness of yourself is really within you and not so much externally to all these things that are around you. So get the education, but keep it in balance, keep it in check.
I,
Just be anchored in something greater than yourself.
I do agree wholeheartedly. I really do. That makes a lot of sense. I've heard it. My both parents, grandfather, aunts, uncles, mom, they said the same thing. So I've heard exactly what you're saying, but sometimes it doesn't stick with us when we begin to get to the point where we think we, have arrived and we're on our own path. And so I think that's what can happen, because I started the gambling. Every weekend I was going to a poker game. And I learned that even while I was practicing law. I had my friends who were doing it, lawyers who were doing it, so I kind of got into it. And of course, that's one of the things that caused me to actually get into trouble and to commit a crime. And it was based upon all of those experiences that got me to where I am, into the ministry, to seeing things in a totally different light, and to just being a totally different individual. And I'm grateful for it, really, to be honest with you. I have no regrets. I'm glad of where I am, even though I missed, and I think anybody would say that, I went to school to be a lawyer, practice law, but, and just lost that. But then I gained something else as a result of having lost that. And I'm very happy. I've gotten to a situation in my life where I'm very content, good family, married. Now, as a matter of fact, we just celebrated 34 years. And so I really can't say I have any regrets. So just...
Can we go back for a minute, though? Because
sure.
you said something that was very important. We don't realize the people that we surround ourselves with, we think they're good, and they are, and certainly, but we don't realize it's taking us slowly down a slope, a slippery slope, in which we don't realize until we get at the bottom of that hill or mountain or whatever you want to call it. You realize, what happened to me? Because we can slowly make changes and shifts that we're not even aware of, even though there may be an inkling within ourselves that says, do you really want to do that? Oh, don't go there, but we still override that, at times. And that little inkling in ourselves, we don't realize is our soul trying to help us.
Sure, I agree. I do agree wholeheartedly. And that's kind of my life, falling into little traps, getting involved with lots of things that I think I should not have gotten involved in. I think I've made a statement that if something is consuming you, then step back from it, But I had to learn that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that at first, And that's what was... gambling was kind of consuming me and got me to a point that I ended up doing some crazy stuff. And so I tell people that if you into something, and I think I've used some examples, like if your wife wants to go out to dinner, to a movie or something on a Friday night, but you find yourself heading straight to a poker game, and that's something that you just have to do, then you need to try to come to grips with it, that something's going wrong in your life. I agree with everything you said. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and you know what? It ties into something I say throughout my episodes is that where we put our attention is where we get more experience around.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where that consuming aspect that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, and when it has an impact on the soul, because the soul is saying, you're putting weight on me. You're allowing this energetic energy to kind of weigh on me. And it's like, I want to be free of that. But like you said, sometimes we have to go down certain roads to realize, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not working for me.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately frees the soul to be able to say, okay, let's figure out what will be working for you.
Mm-hmm.
Will be better and helpful. And therefore we have to let go of certain habits or certain thought patterns or certain reactions or feelings or letting go of some past experiences and just say, that was then, this is now.
Right.
And what do I want in my life now? I
agree. I do agree wholeheartedly.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the way I'm feeling now. I talk to my wife sometimes and I say to her, because all of my friends, I still have good friends who are lawyers. My former partner was retired from the district court bench. We still have lunch together. We still talk. So I see them, but I tell my wife sometimes when I see them and I'm talking and I ran for district court judge, and when I'm looking at all of this politics and stuff, I say to her, I'm so glad I'm kind of out of that realm now. It's like it's a little stressful, and now I feel so free and relaxed, and I feel where you're coming from, and but you have to get to that place. And even when I'm talking to my law friends, I can feel sometimes the stress in them as they talk their health. A lot of the things that they seem to be just stressed out about, and I said, look, you need to calm down. You're letting this get to you, and I see it in them, and it makes me feel so good to realize where I am, but you have to get there. Now, maybe from your profession, you might be able to tell them how to get there. I'm not sure if I know how to get there, but I do know when you're there, and I'm there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think sometimes we are not in tune with all the way of what the warning signs are in our life. There's little things that pop up and tell us, this is a warning sign, but we say, no, we're okay. Something else pops up. It's like, this is a warning sign. No, yeah. We're doing fine.
I can attest to that. When you, even during my gambling, when I was practicing law, you come to a month when you know you need to pay your mortgage, but you're a little short, and you say, I'm going to take care of that, and you go borrow the money because you can pay it back the next week. These were all warning signs and stuff that a lot of other little stuff that would come up, and that I say, how did I get here? How did this happen to me? But I always thought that I could just take care of it and wouldn't be any problem. And I did it for a long time. I practiced law for 10 years, so I did it for a long time. But we don't see those little signs. We don't see them. No, I shouldn't say we don't see them. We see them. We don't recognize them, and we don't take heed to them. So I agree with what you're saying. They're always there. Always there. Or the wife says something to you. First divorce after 5 years, all because of gambling. Another sign. Nice wife, but my gambling got the best of me. And 5 years, that was over. Now you can see the difference now. 34 years in this marriage after you got some sense. So I had to put it like that. Okay.
We get so caught up in living life that we interpret things differently and not seeing them as warning signs. It's like the old analogy about you fell from the ship and you're in the water and you say, help, help, help. God, help me, please. And so God sends, a motorboat by. You said, no, God's going to help me. He said some type of other vehicle by. God's going to help me. So when you get to heaven, he says, why didn't you help me? God says, I did. I showed you these warning
That's
signs. I
exactly
gave you
right.
things.
That's exactly.
I can perfectly, hear. And I think, when you were asking me before, what are those signs? How people be aware of it? And sometimes it's by what you just finished saying is it's by the awareness that if I feel like I have to do this,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's become like a compulsion for me,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that's a warning sign.
Yeah.
Or even stress. I mean, as lawyers, lawyers are really highly, highly stressed, and
Mm-hmm.
they revert to kind of, I call them bad behaviors. It's like, okay, you're trying to relieve the stress, but is that the way to relieve the stress? And
Yeah,
what impact does that have on your soul and your soul evolution?
right. And I hear you very well. And because when I was very fortunate to sponsor continuing legal education for the North Carolina State Bar, even after I went through my difficulties, and I did that for 11 years, and just going across the state, just talking with lawyers, because I dealt with ethics, mental health, and substance abuse,
Okay.
and I just talking with them, you could see and feel some of the stuff that they were going through, and some of them had gone through some really terrible situations. Some of them had actually spent 6 months away in rehab and what have you. So you can sense it, and when you start talking to them, you begin to reflect on your own life. You say, "Oh, I know how you felt. I've been through that situation. I know exactly what it is." But it gives you a feeling of saying, "Boy, I'm so glad I made it through," because some people don't make it through.
Right.
Yeah, some people don't make it through. Some people, and even I made it through, but I really wouldn't want to go through what I went through to get to where I am. And I say to that, I tell that to my church family. I said, there is something. We know we're forgiven, and we know we can start our love again, but some things you just don't want to go through, even if it helps you to get to where you are. I wouldn't want to go through what I went through to get to where I am, but the fact that I went through it helped me to get to where I am.
Right. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's as if sometimes what happens with the soul and the soul's advancement is as if it goes through learning certain experiences. And if it doesn't learn those experiences, then it goes through them again and again and again. Mm-hmm. Because the soul is trying to evolve. And we, on our outer selves, can help the soul by saying, okay, what is it that I'm supposed to learn here? What is it that I'm supposed to garner from this experience? This was ouch. This is painful. Lord, how can you help me not to have to go through this again? Yeah. What can I and open my eyes or open my ears to do a little bit different? But what happens is we get stuck on habits, old past habits.
That's true.
And so we revert back when we're stressed and we're not certain. We go back to those past habits. And the Lord says, I'm telling you what you need to do here, but you're not listening. Mm-hmm. So God can only be on the sidelines, and just like on a football, on the sidelines, can only be on the sidelines and want to coach you through it, but he's saying, but you got to listen. Mm-hmm. And so that's sometimes what we're learning how to do is listen to our inner self and to our soul self to be able to say, okay, I've got to do something different. And it means I got to change this habit pattern. And that's where my great work is, to change the habit pattern.
I hear you. Well said.
We don't realize sometimes I think what we're being attuned to the fact of what is the ego and what the ego wants, because the ego wants fame, the ego wants glory, the ego loves competitiveness because it's going to win. Mm-hmm. The ego always wants to be the first in whatever it does. Mm-hmm. But going back to and having to practice humility is like, okay, but I got there by whose energy? Was it my energy or was it God's energy to help me to get there? And we don't realize everything energetically that exists within us is the energy in which God's giving us to live our life. We think it's our energy, and I can take my energy and use it any way I want to. Well, God gives you that free will to do that, because he says you're going to learn either way, hopefully, or you repeat the lessons until we do learn what we need to learn.
Well, that's what I said. But see, I committed a crime, a serious crime. Right. Yeah, I committed a serious crime, and which sent me to Dorothy Dix Hospital, they thought that because of committing this crime, that I obviously had a mental breakdown. Okay, that was the thinking with my lawyers and everybody. I had to go to court because I robbed the bank. Okay, and then I got a 15-year sentence, of which I spent 5 years in prison. And then it's when I came out, I never forget my mom telling me, she said, you can rub your head in the sand or you can lie down in the ditch. Folks will come by and just push your head further in the sand, or they'll come by and just kick more dirt on you. She said, but you can get up. And some of these folks will give you a helping hand. So I took her advice on that. And that's when my journey started, because I went back to, I already had my BS in commerce and I already had my JD, but I went back to school, went to seminary, got my master's of divinity, then I went on to get my doctor of ministry. And of course, before I did all of this, I got called to the church that I retired from after 32 years. So that was my journey. What happened after I committed the crime, I was sent to Dorothy Dix Mental Hospital. That was the place where it all hit me, right there. It was like sitting there in mental hospital made me reflect on my life, reflect on how I got there, reflect on all the stuff I was doing, reflect on my gambling, reflected on, every little thing I could think of. Me and my first wife had separated, divorced, I lost everything. I didn't have anything. So I'm reflecting. And that, it was during this time where my whole life began to turn in a different direction. So and people tell me, they say, well, did the confinement in prison change you? I said, no, I didn't get changed. I got changed before I went in. And that was and so when I went in, it was no problem with me. I knew that I was going to get it behind me. And when I came out, I was going to be a totally different individual. And that's what happened.
Yeah. Going to Dorothy Dix, which is no longer in existence, it created a space for you. And this is what the soul needs. It needs, actually, because we're so busy, always active, always doing, always kind of wanting more, whatever. But when we're forced into a space, such as Dorothy Dix or any other type of place that we're confined for a period of time, then it moves us into what you just finished saying, which the soul absolutely needs. It needs the space and time to reflect and to kind of piece things together and look at things in a different way. Even though it may be burdensome, it's very helpful because it actually pivots you to say, this is not going to happen anymore. It can be very painful too. Not these experiences you went through, not to say they're not painful, they're not stressful, they're not having, challenges with kind of dealing with it. But what the soul says ultimately, thank you for slowing down and looking and reflecting and allowing us to get more in tune with the greater goodness that exists within you.
Oh yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. I don't even know how to add to that, because that's exactly the way it seemed to happen. But once you get to that place, then all the other stuff that happens to you to get you to where you need to be is only good for you. Is that people ask me all the time, or when I'm in seminars and talking about it, people say, were you rehabilitated? Does prison rehabilitate you? And I know most people will say, yes, it should. And that's part of the reason we put a lot of people in, to get them away from a society, and hopefully they'll be rehabilitated. But for me, I said, no, prison does not rehabilitate you. It's here. That's what rehabilitate you. And if you don't get to that point in your life, your mind doesn't change, your heart doesn't change, you can come right back and go back and do the same thing again. It's only when you have a change of heart and mind that things will be different for you.
Said very well, because that's ultimately what life lessons are trying to show us and focus on, and soul development is trying to help us.
Yeah.
Take the time, look at how you're thinking, look at how you're reacting or feeling about things, look at how you're piecing things together that may not be to your greater good.
Sure.
Maybe you need to reframe it. Maybe you need to look at those thoughts or those misbeliefs or disbeliefs and unbeliefs that maybe happen, and uncouple them and transform them and say, do I really need to continue to think this way? Is it really true? You know, because it may say, it really isn't true. So why am I thinking it? And another, go ahead.
I know. I just say I agree. I'm just listening to you, because what you're saying is actually correct. And you get to a point where it doesn't, you don't even think about it, because you was there. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One example, when I applied for seminary, I was denied the first time. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I can't believe a seminary would deny me. I had all the other qualifications. And then I started thinking about it. I said, well, I was honest on my application, so they saw, what had happened, what I'd done. And so I said, okay, I can understand that. So I applied the next semester. The next semester, I was accepted. You see, but I had that frame of mind to not give up, because I know why. You understand what I'm saying? It was the same thing when I applied to become a sponsor of CLE with the North Carolina State Bar. Everybody was saying, I even had some lawyer friends because there was only one other person who had been charged with embezzlement, a lawyer, and his name was Jim Blackburn. It's public. He was involved with the Fort Bragg matter, and then he became and just embezzled a whole lot of money, but a very prominent lawyer, white guy, and they allowed him to be a sponsor of CLE. And so when I was talking about it, and with one of my friends who down in Henderson, North Carolina, he even mentioned it to me. He said, with what you've done, you might be good doing CLE. I think lawyers would love to hear what you have to say and how you got through what you went through. And so I thought in my mind, I said, oh man, no, Jim's was not a violent crime. Mine was a violent crime. So I said, I don't see what the bar will let me do that. And so I got back to the house and started talking to my present wife. And she said, well, honey, you don't have your license anyway, so what can you lose? So that was that was something it hit me. And so I thought about it. And so I called the state bar, and the first thing they asked me, had I talked with Jim Blackburn? And I said, no. They said, well, you might want to talk with him. So I did talk with Jim. He told me what he did. And so I went on, did paperwork and everything. And they told me that I should hear from them gave me a date, it was something like within the 2 weeks. And that 2 weeks came, and I didn't hear anything from them. Well, again, everything went through my mind. Well, okay, you went through this, and they're not going to. And so then I started thinking. I said, what all they see, and I can say this to you, all they see is African-American man, a convicted criminal, felon, and they just not going to let him be a sponsor of CLE. You know what I did? On that Friday, my present wife would tell you, I got dressed, put on my 3-piece suit, a tie, a shave. I mean, I was, those things say I was togged down, and I went to the bar, state bar, and told them who I was, and that I like to speak with somebody in the continuing legal education section. And they called up, and this white lady came down, and honestly, Judith, I could tell when she saw me that her whole demeanor had changed. And we talked, and she said, Miss Smith, she said, you will hear something from us within the next 3 days. I got this letter from the next 3 days telling me how happy they were to accept me as a sponsor of CLE for the North Carolina State Bar. And I did this for 11 years with only two, now listen to this, with only two disbarred lawyers doing this in the whole state of North Carolina. I was the African-American one, and Jim Blackburn was the white guy. That just show you what happens when you kind of get it together. You know where you are. You know who you are. Even though you may have messed up, don't continue to dwell on that. Just move up from it and do what you got to do.
Yeah, that's a wonderful example. Yes. And a wonderful example for what the soul is. It's like we can either live in the Gretryville and the town Gretryville, or we can say, I'm moving past that and moving, on up, as you're saying.
Yeah.
Because what the soul ultimately wants is just for us to learn from the experience, not to be kind of weighed down and feel depressed or anxious about it. It's like, no, did you learn from it? Can you keep on moving? What you wanted to do, which was very beautiful, is you wanted to give to others an understanding of real life experience. So it really it touches them in a different way than the intellectual knowledge only type of thing.
Yeah. And you've got to understand that, but you have to get to that place in your life. And so many people don't get to that place, and I think that's how they are held back. But when you can realize that and get there, then you can move forward. It's not about this or that. My law partner, my friends I had before I even committed my crime, they are still some of my best friends, because they know who I am now. We go out to eat. He'll call me, my former partner, just talked to me the other day because he is a retired judge and was in politics, so he know it, I know it, so we talk. What's going to happen in this case? What's going to happen? How this going to work out? And that's, and but I've gotten there.
Because if you become really comfortable with who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've been able to take and peel back who you were not. Take off those layers. This is not really me. Let me get to the core of who I am. And it sounds like the friends and the people around you feel that genuineness of who you are. That's what the soul wants too. It wants us to peel back our layers and be very genuine with understanding our connection with our higher source, and call it Jesus, call it Buddha, call it I am presence, call it Atman, call it whatever, I am that I am, Alpha and Omega. They want you to be comfortable with knowing that exists within you. And now what you're doing in many ways, James, is you're serving.
Right.
Giving to others through continuing education or through sitting down and just talking with a friend and allowing them to be able to share their perspective about things and knowing that it's safe and secure and what they're sharing with you. All those small ways are great ways we're serving. And that's ultimately what the soul wants to be able to do, is to serve without the layers of the ego.
I agree. Yeah. When I retired from the church after 32 years, I said I wanted to continue to do something that will I thought would be a ministry. I didn't realize that my home church would call me to help them out, so I've been with them now for a year as an interim pastor. But I about 5 or 6 months before I retired, I started my podcast, okay? And I wanted to do something I thought would be encouraging, inspiring, and transforming. I didn't know anything about it, didn't know what I was supposed to do. I think you might be able to share a little bit of that. Yeah, but I read about it, I looked at it, and for now, I've been doing it now for about a year and a half. And I've done 177 podcasts. I mean, my podcast is being heard in over 15 countries. That's just how you have to say, I'm going to do it. And you cannot give up on it. You just got to do it. I'm not making a whole lot of money, but I'm fulfilled by feeling as if I'm helping somebody. I'm encouraging somebody. I'm trying to inspire somebody. Those are the good feelings that you get, you know. And I tell people all the time, it's not about making a whole lot of money. It's just about doing something that you think will help. And as you do it, and as you help somebody else, you also getting benefits from it. You being, you know, just like you go out and visit. I just tell my members, I said, sometimes I don't always feel like going and visiting somebody who may be in the hospital being sick. But when I force myself to do it, I feel so much better afterwards. You understand what I'm saying? You know, and so that's where life is sometimes.
It really, really is. A statement that came to my mind when you were saying that is by jumping over that hurdle, which is always a kind of a resistance. No, you don't need to do that. But when you jump over that hurdle and you say, I'm doing it anyway, and you go and visit someone, or you go and try to help in a particular way, or do your podcast or whatever it may be, it actually allows the soul to continue to evolve.
Yeah.
Because we're not getting stuck in just being stationary, not doing anything. It's like, well, I'm retired, so I don't have to do anything. But the soul, actually, there's an urge for it to continue to evolve and grow, and wanting to do more things that will help other individuals. Because ultimately, that was the path of Jesus. He was a servant and a servant leader. And so we want to find ways in which if you're Christian based, or even if you're, you know, another religion or Buddhist or whatever, that's one of the tenets. This is that we serve. And it's through the service that the soul evolves. And when the soul evolves, it gets closer to our understanding, is awareness about God, is the relationship to God, and that truly God flows through you to be able to help. And so you're finding yourself in the right place at the right time to be able to help certain individuals say, wow, that worked out. What happened? Because you were in the flow, and the right flow that you need to be in. So that's wonderful. So if you were to say a phrase or a word or a statement as we're winding down our time that you want to leave the listeners and seekers with, what would that be?
Practice humility. That's, you know, and as I said earlier, you know, I have a couple of things that I always say to people when I'm talking with them, you know, especially those who have gone through something. I tell them, make sure you accept responsibility. You know, I'll share with them what I said to you earlier. If something is consuming you, step back from it. So there are a lot of little statements that I'll make depending upon what the situation is as I'm talking to someone. I've had situations, and I've told them, I say, out of mind. You know, my mom used to tell me that out of mind is a devil's workshop. You know, so all these little things, and I have a lot of little phrases like that I share to folks. Those are the kind of things that I would just share, you know. And above all, never give up. That's really important to me. You never give up, because that's the basis. If you don't give up, you can make it. If you give up, then it's all over.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There's so much power in persistence and perseverance, you know, through our experiences that we go through, and know that those experiences changes as we change.
Yeah.
And so we can take the high road out.
That's right.
So we don't have to go the low road. Take the high road.
That's right. That's exactly right.
In order to be your best and better self. My mother used to say, never let it rest. The good get better, the better get best.
I like that one. I got to remember that one. I have to remember that.
So that's what you've done.
Yeah, thank you.
That's what you've done. You've been able to realize I want to move from good, I want to move to the best of who I can be my best self,
Yeah.
In my own evolution and my own growth, and help others to do the same. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you, James, for your story and your thoughts and your wisdom, in this particular episode of having to practice humility.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. You're most welcome. And seekers, please be aware of the fact that humility is something we're always evolving to, because the egos can be very shifty and saying, "No, I want to get back in there in the reins about things." But it's like, no, I can practice humility because that's what Christ did, and I can be. He is the person helping us to show us how to be able to do that. So, thank you, seekers. Be your best self. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.